have the best police force. NYPD, Nassau County, Suffolk County, FBI, state police, they meet on a regular basis. It's a dangerous world. We have to accept that. But on the other hand, we should also realize that we have the best police and law enforcement in the world right here.
That Congressman Peter King touting the local police departments, and there's no exaggeration that this was probably as good a good example of cooperation between the different agencies as we've seen. And he's talking about in New York City, well, they're working with the feds on the bombing investigations, investigation that covers 2 states here, as well as I mentioned, multiple agencies. Now joining us now is Aaron Ford. Aaron spent 30 years with the FBI, special agent in charge at the Newark Division. Now he's he's a VP, I should say, at PSENG. Listen, you've seen it from many vantage points. You saw some of the concerns pre and even in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 of stovepiping when agencies didn't play ball together. Not only did they work with each other, but they seemingly helped each other this time. It actually, this joint task force seems to work. It certainly did for the last 50 hours, didn't it?
I would agree with that. One of the things that happened as a result of 9/11 is we in the law enforcement community during that time realized that there was a gap in cooperation and working together with one another. And it spanned from the federal authorities, state, locals, all the way down into the communities. So since that time, there's been quite a heavy effort into making sure that there's communication, collaboration, and cooperation amongst the agencies, and that law enforcement has gotten out into the communities. Because usually in these type of cases, there's someone out in the community that could provide some really valuable evidence that law enforcement can go on.
You know, no 2 cases are the same here, but I can't remember something where, and we saw the briefing with the FBI earlier today and the law enforcement, that it seems that this guy, either as a lone wolf or maybe he was incentivized by somebody else, but it doesn't seem like he was working in concert with a cell, went from Seaside Park to Chelsea, then back to Elizabeth, and seemingly, as I said, in a lone wolf. Did that surprise you as the investigation seems to unfold here, that this wasn't part of a much larger conspiracy with other parties?
Well, I'm not so sure that he's not a part of anything outside of himself, that he's in fact a lone wolf. Time will tell. The investigation will bear that out. There is a possibility that there might have been someone out there aiding him, helping him, someone that he got materials from. We don't know that as of yet, but it does appear right now that there's one person that the law enforcement authorities are focusing on. And that is really not unusual if it turns out to be the case, because sometimes you have one person that feels disenfranchised by government, by society, and he or she may be in grandma's basement looking at the internet at all times of day and figuring out ways that he or she may strike against America.
You know, Aaron, there's been this perception, and certainly I think it's one that Donald Trump fostered, what he said, that people were cheering in the streets of New Jersey and certain Arabic communities after the towers fell on 9/11, that there are hot spots in New Jersey, whether it's in Jersey City, Patterson, a few other places that are rife with these kind of potential populations. You worked 30 years in New Jersey. Can you separate rhetoric from reality here when it comes to that?
Yeah, I'll tell you the reality. The reality is the American people band together at times like this, and they work with one another, and we're all as one, and they support law enforcement. During my time with the FBI, I never saw or witnessed a group or a bunch of people that were anti-government, law enforcement in the way that I've heard described before. But then again, I am aware that there are some people out there that want to do harm to America, but by and large, America bonds together.
When you saw some of the findings of this investigation where the phone apparently was intact, that didn't explode in that IED that they had set aside in Elizabeth, give an idea to the public who doesn't know this in your experience. just what kind of a treasure trove of intel they could get from these unexploded devices that seem to have some of the same hallmarks, whether it be the one in Chelsea on 23rd Street that didn't explode or the one that we saw in Elizabeth.
There are a couple of things from that. There's this saying that I'd rather be lucky than good any day. And that was an extreme stroke of luck that the government would find that device intact, because that can provide fingerprints as to other jobs that may be similar, and maybe even identify additional people, certainly the person that's in custody right now. In addition to that, the person that was arrested for this crime is alive. And that is another treasure trove of potential information. The FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force will send their best interviewers and interrogators to talk with this individual. And if he is predisposed to provide information, they will get it out of him.
Donald Trump said something today which says, hey, this case, what we saw for the last 50 hours, proof positive. You need to have racial profiling here. You need to treat different populations differently. It's a reality of 2016. What would you say to that?
No, I would disagree about racial profiling. The thing about profiling, there's a right way to profile and there's a wrong way. The right way is criminal profiling. The wrong way is racial profiling. And let me be clear, there's no place for racial profiling in law enforcement, no place for it in our Constitution, no place for it in America. However, when you look at criminal profiling, that is profiling based on an individual's actions. And that is certainly fine to take a look at what a person is doing, as opposed to the color of their skin or a religious garment that they're wearing on their head. That is wrong. It always will be wrong and should continue to be wrong. But criminal profiling, we should use every legal means that's necessary to protect America.
Aaron Ford. Aaron, thank you for the time. I appreciate it. All right, guys, a couple things from that conversation. We'll get into the politics of this because certainly it's very real. And we'll do that next segment as it relates to both the reactions of both Trump and Hillary. But one of the many things that Trump did say today is proof positive, this Exhibit A, we need to bring back racial profiling. Now, my guest just made the distinction between criminal profiling and racial profiling. Is that semantics, Frank, or are they two very different things?
Well, to some degree, there is a degree of semantics there. We heard earlier Hillary's response, we're after the individuals, not after the religion. In this case, we are after an ideology, and that ideology happens to be rooted in, or at least advanced by, a specific religious belief. It would be the same thing as if we went back and we're hunting the Italian mafia in New York City, but we're only checking out Irish neighborhoods, or we're only going to Protestant churches, or we're only working in those communities instead of going to Catholic churches and dealing with Italian neighborhoods, which was largely the American mafia. So there is a difference, but it's somewhat a political issue. It's somewhat a bit of semantics there.
But if you're going after a race, or if you're going after a faith, or whatever else, I've heard from a lot of folks, it's very easy to not only forget about civil liberties and where it starts and where it stops, but it's counterproductive too, because at the same time that you're going to be trying to, figure out what mosque this guy's in, you want the imams coming to you and saying, I got this crazy guy here saying some really weird stuff here, and he's not the kid I knew 2 years ago. Exactly. You want them coming to the authorities. So if you create an us against them, right, it doesn't work for you, right?
That's correct. And it has to be something. We've heard this time and time again, that the community itself, so in this case, the Islamic community, has to stand up against the radical elements within it. Because until they do, and until they begin to take that stand, they will continue to be pooled together with every crazy, every terrorist, until they get it together.
Plus, how many tens or hundreds of thousands of American Muslims travel to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Iraq every single year and come back? So it's such an enormous number. First of all, it seems like it would be impractical. And second of all, you would flood the resources of the people who have to parse through that data to try to find the needles in the haystack that they're actually looking for.
But also, there's an unspoken part to this, which is, if it's not a two-way street and it's a one-way to say, hey, listen, you people, you don't come and tell us when there's trouble here, we're going to blame all of you. They're less incentivized if they hear you people than if it goes the other way. Now, I've heard that from police brass who are not doing the PC routine when the red light's not on the camera. They'll tell me, if you keep doing this, they're our best source. Where do you think we get our breaks from? They come and they tell us what's going on. But if we keep saying, yeah, we're going to infiltrate your mosques, you don't know who's going to be on the prayer rug here. It could be one of my guys undercover. They're going to be far less likely to help you out, right?
That's true. I mean, we have to get to the point where we call an ugly baby an ugly baby. If it is radical Islamic terrorism, then it is radical Islamic terrorism because it frames not only the response, but it also frames the tools and the techniques that are utilized.
But here's my problem. I've heard Trump say, oh, we're afraid to say it. Okay, I think at one point Obama even did. He goes, I'll call it that. Now what? What did that exactly get me? I said the 3 magic words, okay? What does that magically do? It doesn't say, okay, all of a sudden I can press the magic red button and we're going to solve the problem because I said the 3 words. You know, I hear the semantics and the political season of it, but what I just don't get is how practically, to Andrew's point, if you basically say a whole region of the world are dangerous, and you're not even making distinction between who are American citizens, like this guy was, right?
Right.
Versus somebody who are coming here and overstaying their visas and you want to keep an eye on them because you got tipped off about them. It just seems to be, my gosh, an impracticality for guys in your world to be able to watch millions of people just because we said so.
That's true. And active surveillance on an individual is, to your point, Andrew, is resource intensive. Having someone on a list where they travel back and forth and their movements are checked, fine, that's not that difficult.
Well, and I think you're touching on something that I was getting towards also, which is that it seems that you would need another variable. The pools are just too big.
Correct.
Traveling to these countries, or even Muslim or not Muslim, let's say you want to use those two, you would still need something else, some indication that they've been radicalized, or that they're on some sort of list, a terror watch list.
And if I could, apparently where he went to was one of the most Al-Qaeda intensive strongholds, or that was the most unstable, that was completely controlled by radical elements. They knew that was part of his travel.
Which is fine, but you would either need to ban everybody from going there or allow everybody to go there. I mean,
that could become that additional variable that you mentioned.
Well, what are the kinds of variables that we might look for to try to enhance and hone down on who exactly we should be watching for?
Without getting too far into tracking communications, which I think really does begin to break into the civil liberties issues, locating actual physical locations within the country is going to take additional resources in country. Because when someone checks in or out of a country, they get the stamp that says Afghanistan, but it doesn't say Afghanistan, P.S. he went to the Al-Qaeda stronghold. So we do have to find a better way to address that issue.
When we come back here, more about the politics of terror. As we've told you, we're 50 some odd days out here, and each candidate is in that final stretch. And of course, this became a huge issue come November, the reaction to the bombings, and we got both reactions from the candidates. Will this be a big factor in the race? We'll discuss after this.